Good morning, Molly. It is time to do the second part of our symmetrical patterns that are painted with complementary color schemes. Now, this is how far we got last week. We have 4 different patterns that we made, and we made them symmetrical so that if they were folded in half, they are the same on both sides. And now we're going to do the fun part. We're going to add all of the color. So the supplies that you are going to need today are your drawings from last week, maybe your little fun color bubbles, because that will remind you what colors make what colors. I've got a color wheel. If you have one, pull it out. Otherwise, you can just look at mine. You're going to need your watercolors, your paint brushes. You want some medium and some small, a paper towel to wipe your paint on, and your container of water. We are, before we get started on the actual painting, let's talk a little bit about our color wheel. So 2 weeks ago, we were talking about mixing secondary colors, and we also talked about primary colors. And when they're put together traditionally, to show off all these different colors, they're put in what we call a color wheel. And in my color wheel, now the color wheel is fun because it not only helps us to figure out what you need to do to mix together to make that color, but it also helps you create some special color palettes or colors that you can put together to make an interesting painting or drawing. Now, one of the most common color combinations are what we call complementary colors. And those color sets are the colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. So today we are going to be working with complementary color sets. So what we have is red and green, orange and blue, and violet and yellow, or purple and yellow. These color combinations create a lot of contrast. They make the other color, the color opposite them, stand out. And that's why you'll often see these color combinations. So we're going to get started. We're going to choose a different complementary color set for 3 of our patterns, and we are going to paint those with those complementary colors. Now, because we're using watercolor, we're going to probably have to wait in between. So you'll take a little break once we get painting, that they don't bleed all together. So I'm going to leave the color wheel here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose one of my color combinations, my patterns, and I'm going to start with red and green. Like we always do, you want to get your colors very wet, and you want to use a paintbrush that works well for painting in the small area that you have. You do not have to mix your own colors, secondary colors, this time if you don't want to, because sometimes we get a much more vibrant pigment if you use the ones that are already mixed for you. So go ahead and use the ones that are pre-mixed. So I'm going to start with the red, and on one side I'm going to do all of the red shapes that we drew in with our little outline, our little shapes, and that we outlined. And I'm going to fill that in. Now I kind of put some of those little special lines in there at the end, so we'll see what we do with that. If your brush is too big and you're having a hard time filling in the smaller spaces, then go ahead and get a smaller brush. And you can put a sheet of paper underneath your painting in order to protect the surface of the table. I probably should grab one so I can get to the edge of my painting. Now this is watercolor and it's a lot of fun. You can add a little bit of just your water to it if you want to create some different textures. You can see I just dropped water on it and it makes the paint spread in kind of interesting ways. Now on the other side, I'm going to take that same red, but instead of doing the shape itself, I'm going to do the outside. I'm going to go around the shape. This would be, so this is what we call positive space. And all of the background around it would be what we call negative space. I'm thinking I maybe want a slightly larger brush. And what I like about doing negative space is that all of a sudden it makes your shapes really pop. And you haven't even painted them. When you're doing yours, you can do them the same if you want. I'm going to get my slightly smaller brush and I'm going to go and do the inside. So you can see too what appears to be two very different patterns, even though we know that they were symmetrical, but now they're painted slightly differently. I'm going to let these sit. The color combination that we're going to use, once again, is the color opposite the red, so that's going to be green. But we don't want to add any green until this is completely dry. Complementary colors, when you mix those together, they make really nice browns. So we don't want a brown, so we want to let this sit while we go on to our next set. Now the next complementary color set I'm going to do is blue and orange. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with my blue. And you just want to always get that really nice and wet. And I haven't decided, I'm going to get both my dark blue and my light blue wet. I might kind of use a combination of those two. I'm going to do the same thing that I did on my last pattern, and I'm going to do the background, the one color, and then I'll do the objects on the other one. Switch it over, and then we'll do it's fun to have our patterns already drawn in for us so that we can just paint. Now I am going to drop just a little bit of water inside these because I think that will make it interesting since they're kind of like drops of water. And those are pretty wet, so you can kind of see how that makes the paint spread when I add a little extra water. We'll set that aside, and we will do our next one, which is purple and yellow. I'm going to do my fish. You want to always make sure that you get your paint brush really clean in between, especially when you're using some of these lighter colors, because it can change its color, which you don't want to happen. So I'm using the yellow, and again, I think I'm going to do that same thing that I've been doing, where I'll reverse it. I'll do the object on one side, our color combination, and that way we'll see the color combination in a different way, because on one side we'll have more of that one color and on the other it will be the opposite. And always add, if your paint seems like it's not spreading, that means you just need to add more water to it, okay? So we're going to go in and we're going to do the negative space. It really is like a curvy line on this side, the negative space. I'm going to get my other second yellow a little bit wet. Okay, Molly, we've got the beginning of our 3 complementary colors. We're going to go ahead and let these dry, and then we're going to come back and we're going to add the opposite color to them. So take a little break and then meet me back here. Okay, Molly, we are now back with our dried patterns, and you should have 3 of them that are in front of you. We are going to be continuing with our complementary color schemes. So I'm going to start off with my red one, and our complementary color schemes, again, just a reminder, are the colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. And we did red, so that means our next color is going to be green. I'll be getting my green nice and wet. You can use your pre-mixed green. You do not need to mix your own. If, on the other hand, you don't have a green, you can look to your color wheel or to my color wheel or your color bubbles. And so if you need to make a green, just a reminder, you'll use the 2 colors that are on each side of it. So the blue and the yellow. And that's the same thing that happens on the color wheel, that we can use that as a guide. We're going to go ahead and start in the opposite areas now than what we painted earlier. I've got a couple different greens here. I'm going to kind of get them all wet. Let those soak. I really enjoy working with watercolor because you can work with them in such a way that some areas are darker and lighter, and it can create an interesting effect. It is important to work with it when the rest of the paint is dry. Otherwise, it would bleed into those areas, and then we would have brown. So you can see that is the other green. It's a little bit darker. It's a little bit more of a blue-green, which is kind of fun. So I'm just going to work between what I always enjoy looking at once you get the spaces painted in is how differently the colors look when they're surrounded by other colors. And that really changes the look of our paper. Now this, if you were doing this on your own and we weren't still just working on our complementary colors, you could cut these in half and you have 2 really fun little bookmarkers or little note cards that you could use, and you could leave the red one white. I like patterns because they're just fun to paint, and they're fun to make kind of in doodle. So Molly, if you're having fun working on this, go ahead and make as many patterns and designs as you like. And now in this one, I'm doing all of that negative space. And there we have our first set of complementary colors. And you can see where we have the red in the background versus the area that we have the green in the background. Even though they're the same pattern, it really creates a different visual. We'll set that to the side, and we're going to move on to our blue. And across from the blue is the orange. So we're going to go ahead and use our orange. Now I think that when I'm looking at these, I don't know if I have a really good orange. All of these look a little not very bright. So I'm going to keep getting this wet. I might have to add a little bit of yellow to it so it feels more orange and less brown. I'm going to get a little bit of my red, orange wet. So if you feel like your orange is too dark, you can always add yellow. And we know orange is made by red and yellow. So if you want it to be lighter, you would add yellow. If you want it to be darker, you would add more red. I'm going to see how this orange looks. That's not too bad. I'm going to hold my watercolor paper down. I realize as I'm looking in the video that it looks more brown than it does in real life. I feel like on screen it's looking a little more brown, but you can see up close. And I've got a lot of this yellow going on, so I'm going to keep adding that. A little more water. And now I'm doing the interior of my droplets. And again, we have that reverse, just like we had with the red and the green, which really creates, I think, just an interesting combination. So for the yellow, we are going to do what's opposite it on the color wheel, which is purple. I might have to mix my own purple. So I've got a lot of blue right here, and I'm just going to start mixing it in my red. If you don't have any purple left, you can do the same thing. You can create your own purple. And we would do that by mixing blue and red, the two colors that are across from or next to our purple. So let's see what we've got here. I've got a purple. This feels pretty dark, but not bad. Not too bad. I'm flipping my fish around, and we're going to keep using our mixed purple, but this time, of course, we are going to do the space around our yellow fish. The yellow is such a light color that you do have to be careful not to There you have it. We've got our yellow and purple complementary color scheme, our orange and blue color scheme, which is a complementary, and our red and green. So these are, like I said at the beginning, very specific color combinations that are common and used often. Now that you've seen what these different colors look like together, we have one more last pattern. So Molly, I want you to create your own color combination. And it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be across from each other on the color wheel. I want you to choose ones that you think will look good together that we haven't already done. You can choose to do each side differently, or you can choose to do them like we just did them, where you do the opposite on each side. I decided when I was looking at all mine that I want to do red and blue. I just really like that color combination and feel like that is always nice looking. So I am going to do the hearts red on one side. And I got my red really nice and wet, so the color is saturated. And then I'm going to do the reverse, just like we did on the other side. and I'm going to do the red on the outside of the hearts. We're going to let these dry, Molly, and then we'll be back in just a little while and we'll paint the other side. So take a break, and I look forward to seeing how what your color combination is. I'll just see you in a... Okay, Molly, I want to finish the last of my patterns. Now, I don't know what color you chose, but I decided I wanted to do a color scheme with red and blue. So I'm going to get my blue wet one more time. And I like the slightly lighter blue as well, so I'm just going to get both of those wet. And I'm going to go ahead and add the blue to my hearts. Now my blue and my red are two primaries and no secondaries. Our complementary color schemes are always one primary and one secondary. So this one with the two primaries is a little bit different. This started to turn a little purple because my red wasn't all the way dry, Molly. And that is what happens when you get a little bit impatient and you don't really give it all the time that it needs. But red and blue make purple, so it's not the worst color combination to have mix. You can see how we've got that now. So that's what we have at the end of our project time. We have a bunch of different patterns that we made so that they were symmetrical, but we painted them with colors that kind of played around with that and changed that up. And then we did our complementary colors. We did colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. So we have our red and green, our blue and orange, our yellow and purple. And then for our final pattern, we chose whichever color combination that we wanted to make. I can't wait to see what color combination you chose. And I hope that you will post those on Seesaw so that I can take a look. Have a great week, and I hope you have fun making patterns and different colors.